What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. Unless it's your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed unless you're a hater and you just weren't raised right, girl, and you just got bad taste. And if that's the case, girl, just say that. Today's video is it's probably the most requested case that I have ever gotten. And the reason why I had not done it up until this point is that it is, I feel like, the most talked about case out here in these YouTube streets. You guys have made it very clear that y'all don't care about that. No matter how many times it's been done, y'all still want to hear from me. So here we go. I actually had not really taken a deep dive into this case before now, and so a lot of this was new to me. Before we get into the story though, I do want to share some good news with you guys. I have officially found a home for Blue and myself in Houston, Texas. It is official. Everything is done. I just have to move in, which I'm not doing so until the end of June. We were there last week. We had a great time. Blue loved it. I loved it. I love my new place. I love my new neighborhood. And that's just it. I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I feel horrible though because I had a couple of little pieces of bad luck happen. I packed Blue's luggage. He has this little backpack that he takes to daycare when he boards and when we go out of town. It's the cutest little backpack, and I put his food and his toys in it. I took his 3 favorite toys. And at the time that we left, there was also a pack of chicken wings, some anchovies, some beef, like his food, and some fruit. Now I put the backpack on, leaving the hotel. We go to the car, and I'm putting my suitcase in the trunk. I don't know what it is about traveling, y'all, but something always happens to me. Right before I put his backpack in the trunk, I'm like, oh no, he can snack on his food, so let me put it in the front seat with him so I can, allow him to snack during the ride. So at some point, I put his backpack on top of the Jeep. I have a Wrangler, right? Put it on top of the Jeep. I'm putting the stuff in the car. I'm putting him in the car, and then I get in the car. I do a whole circle around the parking lot of the hotel to try to figure my way off the lot. Then as I'm going down the street, I'm hearing like this tapping noise on the roof of my car, and I'm just like, what is that? And my initial thought was that maybe I didn't attach something correctly because, with the Wrangler parts come off. I have been riding with the top off with my niece because she thinks it's so cool, and I gotta look like the cool auntie any chance that I can. I'm checking the lashes, and I'm just like, something has to be loose. The faster I go, like, the harder the tapping is, just do, 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 do. And I'm like, okay, let me just pull over and check this out. But then all of a sudden it stops. Mind you, I'm leaving at like close to 4 a.m. so it's pitch black outside. Something told me to look in the rear view. I don't see anything, but it is very dark. So I'm just like, okay, whatever. Pull into the gas station anyway, buy myself a little Red Bull, and we hit the road. When we get to the first rest stop, when I'm ready to, walk Blue, feed him, I'm looking for his backpack. I can't find it nowhere. And I realized what I was hearing was his luggage tag, probably, or like one of the buckles on the backpack hitting the top of the car. And then that girl flew off into the dark of the night, and I never even saw it. And I felt so bad because it had his 3 favorite toys in it, and Blue is very particular about his toys. I feel like he didn't took inventory and he might know something is up, but he really is particular about his toys, and he rotates them. Like, he picks one and then he'll carry it everywhere with him for like a week. He even sleeps with it. So these were the 3 that he had in the most recent rotation. And I feel like he probably is here like, girl, where are my things? And he doesn't know what happened. Also, Blue is so spoiled, I realized, because I actually drove just to avoid boarding him back to back like that. Sacrifices you make for your children. I really drove 8.5 hours to avoid having to put him back in a boarding facility so soon after he had previously been boarded. But I'm glad he does really good on road trips. He's been on longer road trips, and he really enjoyed himself in Houston. Now let's get into the mess that is this story. Brittany Norwood was born on May 19th, 1982, which her birthday is tomorrow. Sheer coincidence, this was not planned at all. There is not a whole lot about her childhood or her early life, but we do know that she comes from a pretty good family, and they're from Seattle, Washington. From an early age, she displayed a lot of interest in athleticism, in sports. She played soccer. A couple of her siblings also played soccer as well, and she was really, really good at it. So good that following her high school graduation, she goes on to play soccer for Stony Brook University in New York. So sis was quite the athlete. Brittany was very dedicated to her craft, and she was recognized for all of her hard work. She received recognition from a National Soccer Association. She took soccer very seriously, so much so that one of her previous coaches said that Brittany actually hated losing more than she enjoyed winning, which they say, child, is a trait amongst the greatest of athletes. Now, like I said, not a lot was known about Brittany's personal life, but there were teammates of hers who would describe her as being a very nice girl, a very funny girl, a fun girl to be around, the life of the party. However, others' perceptions of her were that she was not to be trusted, that sis was a whole liar and a thief. New teammates were often warned to watch their things around her, to also always secure their things in a locker, to make sure said locker was locked at all times, because Brittany, she just liked to steal. Now, Leanna, one of the teammates of hers, heard these things about her, but she also got to see the side of Brittany that people who liked her saw. Like, she got to see the funny, charismatic Brittany. So she decides that despite everything she had heard about Brittany, she's going to give her a chance and try to see, you know, if they could develop a friendship, which they actually do. The friendship between the two of them blossomed so much so that they eventually considered each other to be best friends. However, unfortunately, this relationship goes sour when a t-shirt and an undisclosed amount of money belonging to Leanna goes missing. And despite wanting to give her best friend the benefit of the doubt, she was inclined to believe that it was her good sis who had stole all of her things. Of course, Brittany was not happy to hear that she was being blamed for stealing these things, thus resulting in the end of their friendship. Y'all, I hate my eyebrows and I can't live my life like this. So I'm going to take them off and we're going to keep going with the story. I'm just letting you know what I'm doing. There were also other instances where Brittany, you know, acted a little shady. It seemed like sis had stolen, or at the very least been dishonest. She had seen this hairstylist's work on Facebook. So she reaches out to the woman and schedules a hair appointment. Now she shows up to her booking, sits in the chair, gets her hair done, bundles all of the things, extensions flowing all down her back. The stylist finishes her hair. She tells her, you know, how much she owes. Brittany goes, retrieves her bag from the waiting area, and she's digging all up in her purse. And then she's like, wait a minute, my money has been stolen. Like, I had $1,200 in my bag. It's no longer here. She tells the stylist that this was the only form of payment that she had on her, that she had taken it out of the bank specifically for this booking, and now she is pissed because she won't be able to pay her. She puts on a whole commotion. She picks somebody that works there at the salon and accuses them. The owner of the shop was not buying it. Brittany had left her bag in the waiting area, and there was a receptionist that was there the whole time. The shop owner felt like, no, I know my employee. She never would have stolen your money. This is not true. Brittany's act, though, was so convincing that the stylist herself, she did believe her. And she felt so bad. She was so apologetic. She was also embarrassed that something like this could happen in her workplace. She was apologizing to Brittany. She was telling Brittany, you know, don't worry about the payment. It's okay. But even still, Brittany is like, no, you deserve to be paid for your services. At least for the hair, I'll have to just bring you money back and reimburse you at least for the hair. Like, allow me to do that. So that was the agreement. But once she leaves the shop, she actually goes and blocks the stylist on Facebook. A whole scammer. After college, Brittany decides to move to Washington, D.C. to pursue her dream of being a personal trainer and eventually owning her own gym. In the meantime, to support herself financially, she gets a job at Lululemon, the retail store that sells athletic wear. And you know what? Fun fact, for longer than I'm comfortable admitting, I thought this store was called Lululemon. Like, my brain completely cut the LE clean out. It was just Lululemon in my mind. Ridiculous. She works at this location for a little while, and then something happens. I'm not sure. It was mixed reportings. It was some saying that she was accused of stealing. Some say that the workplace, for whatever reason, had become hostile. I'm not sure. All I know is they decide to transfer her to the Maryland location. That is where she meets a 30-year-old Jana Murray. Now, Jana, originally from Texas, was also there working while pursuing her own dreams. She was working on a dual master's in business, admin, and communication as well. She was also engaged to her longtime boyfriend, and the two of them had planned to marry after They had both graduated. But strange things began happening when the new girl started working at her particular store. You see, the physical counts were always less than what they should have been. These kind of things are normal at any retail store, but this kind of thing was not happening as frequently, and the deltas weren't as dramatic as they were before this new girl starts working at the store. Jana was not the only person at the store that noticed this. Other employees also noticed the fact that, you know, certain instances where Brittany was working, the drawer was a little shorter than normal, and the inventory as well. Jana's suspicions are further confirmed when one evening the two of them, she and Brittany, are working alone together at the store, and she sees a pair of Lululemon leggings in Brittany's bag. And she asked Brittany if she paid for those. Straight up, she's just like, have you already paid for these? And Brittany is like, oh yeah. And she names one of the other co-workers as the person that had rang her up earlier in the evening. Jana says okay, but she had this nagging suspicion that sis was lying. Now, instead of Jana further pushing the issue in the moment or accusing her of lying, she just says okay, and then she calls the co-worker that Brittany claimed rang her up earlier that day. She's like, hey, did Brittany buy a pair of leggings with you earlier today? And that coworker is like, no, like I didn't ring her up. You know, sis likes to steal. At this point, Jana decides to just give it over to the store manager to address with her however she sees fit and let it go. After briefly speaking with the manager, she goes about the rest of her evening as normal, working alongside Brittany. Everything seems fine. Brittany and Jana were set to work until closing that night. Typically around 9 o'clock, they would lock the store, count down the drawers, clean up the store, and then Jana was a key holder, so she would be responsible for actually locking the door, and then they would leave at the same time. Now, the following morning, on March 12, 2011, around 8 a.m., the store manager arrives to the store, and she notices first off that the lights are on. And not only that, the front door is unlocked. This is unusual, but at first she's just thinking that maybe one of the other key holders had gotten there before her, gotten there a little early for whatever reason, had let themselves in and forgot to lock the door. A few steps into the store, she realizes that that is not the case. The store is in shambles. There is merchandise everywhere, thrown all over the floor, and not only that, she hears moaning coming from the rear of the store. And sis is like me. She wasn't going back there to investigate. She runs clean up out the front door to call the police. You know, it's trained professionals to handle such things. And I've been plenty things in my day, but said professional ain't one. However, as soon as she gets out the front door, she sees a man coming down the street. And so she stops him and she's like, hey, can you go back and check it out? Because it could potentially be a situation where immediate assistance could save somebody's life. And the man, he agrees to go inside and check out the scene. When he goes inside and makes it to the rear of the store, he sees a woman laying face down on the floor. And then there is also another woman that is in the bathroom on her back with her hands tied above her head. She is the one that is moaning and making the noise and is obviously, still alive. The deceased woman is 30-year-old Jana Murray, and the woman who is restrained in the bathroom is 28-year-old Brittany Norwood. It's obviously too late to do anything to save Jana, but Brittany, however, aside from being tied up, she just has scratches all over her body. The crotch of her pants is ripped out. Aside from that, really, she has no other trauma. So she is immediately taken to the hospital to, make sure everything is okay and there isn't anything internally going on. Luckily for Brittany, all of her injuries are pretty superficial. She does have a gash on her forehead that requires stitches, but that was pretty much as bad as it got for her. Her injuries were significantly less serious than Jana's, who unfortunately has suffered 331 lacerations. And these were not superficial cuts like Brittany's. These were deep and far more brutal than any of the ones that have been inflicted upon Brittany. And most of the wounds were to Jana's face, which is typically a sign that an attack is personal. Experts estimated that the amount of time that it would have taken to inflict all of these wounds would be about 16 minutes, and that's with taking very few short breaks in between. And what was super sad is the fact that they also believed that Jana was breathing up until the final blow. So she suffered through all of this. They could tell that Jana had attempted to fight back by the defense wounds on her hands, but the number of defense wounds just made up a small fraction of the total amount, because over 200 of the wounds were to her face alone. It's horrifying to imagine that she literally lived through all of that. Investigators immediately go in to collect evidence to try to piece together a timeline and a series of events to explain what had happened to these two girls. One of the most noticeable pieces of evidence left behind was shoe prints. There were two different sizes of bloody shoe prints throughout the store. One being a size 14 tennis shoe, the other one significantly smaller. The size 14 shoe had actually been left behind in the store, child, like a murderous ass Cinderella story. Who leaves a shoe behind? The other shoe, however, is not inside the store anywhere. They noticed that some of these footprints lead up to an exit door in the rear of the store, but when they opened the door, the prints stopped. There were none on the outside. Now, investigators thought that this made sense if they initially planned for that to be their exit strategy, but then they either could not open the door or decided last minute not to exit that way and turned around. So they didn't think that was too strange at first. They also noticed that the store's safes are empty, leading them to believe this was like a robbery gone bad. And there are also over a dozen bloodstained items, obviously used as weapons, but all of these items could be found within the store. They were all things that belonged to Lululemon, many of which came from a toolbox that they kept inside of the store. There was a hammer, there was a wrench, there were paint brushes, so I'm not exactly sure what role a paintbrush would play in all of this, but it was there. Meanwhile, Brittany is at the hospital being treated for her cuts and bruises. Now, while at the hospital, she also revealed that she had been sexually assaulted by one of the perpetrators, and so they examined her accordingly, but they don't find any DNA and they don't find any trauma, which isn't helpful at all because they had relied on that to at least help them get a little further in their investigation and find out who had done this. Because Brittany was not that badly injured, they wasted no time getting to the hospital and getting her statement. They wanted to know anything that she could remember that could help them get to the bottom of what had happened. And she was very eager to answer any questions that they had and assist them in any way. But first, sis had a question of her own. She wanted to know how Jana was doing. The investigator that is there to question her feels really bad. She is now faced with the task of letting this girl know that her co-worker and possible friend did not survive the attack. But she does so and explains that this is all the more reason it is important for her to let them know anything that she can remember, any details at all. Brittany agrees and she's like, of course, she's willing to help any way that she can. She'll tell them what happened to the best of her knowledge by what she remembers. She tells the investigator that the night before was a closing night like any other night that they had worked late at the store. They closed it down after the last customer. They counted down the drawers. Everything was fine. They did a cleanup of the store. They had actually left together and Jana had locked the front door. She said that she saw Jana get inside of her car and she herself proceeds toward the subway station that she typically took to get home. But then she realizes that she had left her Metro Pass inside of the store and so she needed to get it in order to be able to get home. So she reaches out to a coworker who then puts her in contact with Jana. She tells Jana of the situation and Jana is not upset because she had actually left her laptop at the store. Now initially she was just gonna, return the next day and get it. It wasn't that big of a deal, but if she had to go back to the store for Brittany, she was like, hey, I could just go ahead and pick up my things too. No biggie, I'm on my way back. Meanwhile, Brittany walks back to the store to wait for Jana. Around 4 to 5 minutes after 10 p.m., Jana pulls up in front of the store and parks her car there because she's just planning on running in and out. They go inside the store together and they close the door behind them, but they don't lock it because, like I said, they weren't going to be there long. Except Brittany's Metro Pass is not where she remembered leaving it. In fact, she can't find it anywhere. Jana has her laptop in hand. She is ready to go. It's getting late. And she knows that Brittany is ready to go home too. They had a long little evening at the store, and so she does not hesitate to assist Brittany with looking for her things. As they're coming back toward the front of the store to look up there, they notice that the double doors of the store are now wide open. Within seconds of realizing this, they are ambushed by two men in the dark dressed in all black. The two men both had on ski masks and they were initially hiding behind the clothing racks before they hopped out and ambushed the women. They couldn't really see much of them for Brittany to be able to give a full and detailed physical description of either of the men, but she could tell that one of them was about 6 feet and the other one was really short. He was about 5'5". She said that she could also tell by their voices that they were both male and that they were both white. The guy that stood about 6 feet, he instantly grabs Jana, hits her over the head, and she falls to the floor, while the shorter guy grabs a hold of her by the hair and drags her to the rear of the store. This was actually the last she saw of Jana for a while. During the entire course of the attack, the two women remained separated. Now, her time with Mr. 5-5 consisted of her being dragged by her hair to the rear of the store, like I said, then to the front of the store. He forces her to empty out the registers and fill his backpack with the cash, then to open up the safes and fill his backpack with that money as well. He then proceeds to zip tie and torture her. He's threatening her life. He rips the crotch of her leggings open and proceeds to assault her. And during this, he's making a lot of derogatory racial remarks against her until finally he walks away. But he's only gone for a short time before he returns with a wooden hanger and proceeds to sodomize her. This whole time, she could hear Jana screaming from the other room, but the screams became weaker and less frequent, and then eventually they just stopped altogether. Not long after the screams stopped, the guys come into the room where Brittany is, grab her up, take her to where Jana is. Jana is laying face down on the floor. They throw her on top of Jana, and then they begin laughing and telling her that this could have been her as well, but they were going to spare her life simply because she was more fun to fuck. This little mascara is my favorite. I bought the little travel size just to try it, but I love it with our heart and soul. Before leaving the scene, the two assailants, they grab her up off of Jana and then toss her into the employee's restroom where she would later be found. While describing to detectives the things that had happened to them that night, Brittany is distraught. She is constantly blaming herself for what happened because she felt like it was her fault. If she didn't have that need to go back, these things would not have happened. Both ladies would have made it home safe and sound that night, and Jana would still be here. The only security footage that was available was the security footage from the Apple store right next door. So they go to Apple and they request that, which of course they are more than happy to hand over. And upon reviewing the footage, they see two white males passing the store very quickly around the time that Brittany said that this attack occurred. And so they are sure that these are their guys. The only issue now is that they have to positively identify the men. So they go to the news, they put out the security footage, warn the public that these two men are wanted, they are presumably very dangerous, and let them know what they had done to these two girls. The city goes into a panic because this was a really, really nice neighborhood and nobody really expected anything like this to go down there. It's like, if you can't go to Bella Noche's, girl, where can you go? The detectives then decide to speak with the employees of the Apple store who had closed that night. They're hoping that maybe they heard something or saw something that could also be helpful to them in solving this case. 3 employees plus a security guard of the Apple store who were all on duty that night claimed to have heard it all. But it all was not at all in line with what Brittany had told them had happened. They claim to have heard a lot of loud shouting and yelling coming from the other side of the wall. However, this yelling and screaming that they heard coming from the other side of the wall was between 2 women. No male voices were heard at all. One woman's voice is heard yelling, "Talk to me, don't do this, talk to me. What's going on?" Which was then followed by screaming, but not screaming like arguing screaming, screaming like out of pain. Then they hear that exact same voice say, "God help me, please help me." Y'all, told y'all that I had not really read anything beyond a headline for this story before researching it, and so all of this is fairly new to me. And when I say I read this and I was pissed off, it even made me shed a little gangster tear. I ain't gonna lie, but I'm still a thug out here in these streets, and don't you ever forget it, okay? How could you hear this coming from next door and you just don't do anything about it? Like, you don't call the police. I can understand you not going next door to investigate, but girl, at least call the police. How could you just ignore it? Especially the security guard. And I understand, because I know a lot of y'all gonna say, oh, he's there to protect the product, he's there to make sure they don't steal, which I'm pretty sure is the function of the security guard. But I'm here to tell you that Day would never, okay? He would never. And so I don't want to hear that as an excuse. There is no excuse, honestly, for them to have heard the things that they said they heard and not act on it at all. Like, I just could not believe they literally were just like, oh yeah, I heard a woman fighting for her life. Excuse me? One of the employees that they interviewed said that the voices were so loud and clear that it sounded like the altercation was happening within their own store. Like, that's how loud it was. And it gets worse than that. They said not only did they hear the screaming, these screams were then followed by grunting and then a dragging noise as if someone was dragging something really heavy across the room, and then it went silent. The manager of the Apple store said that he thought that the noise was just drama, and so they don't, take any action or attempt to call 911. The security guard said he also heard it and thought the same, and so instead of responding or taking any kind of action, he puts in the earphones of his iPod and listens to music to tune it out. All of the people that heard this commotion, none of the people did anything to try to interfere or call for help. This ruffled my feathers more than any part of the story, honestly. Honey, I was agitated, irritated, agitated, girl, all of the things, okay? Something else that they noticed while going over the security footage was the fact that Jana's car was not actually parked out front like Brittany said that it was. Initially, detectives, they think that probably the guy stole the car, and so they just initiate a search for it. Because Jana still had her Texas plates, they didn't think that it would be too difficult to spot over in Maryland, and they're actually right about this. It had actually been spotted by another officer the same night of the incident, a few blocks from the store around midnight. The officer was patrolling the area. The first time that he sees the car, there is someone inside of it just sitting and the lights are on. 2 hours later, when the police officer comes back down passing that same spot, the car is still there, but this time the lights are off and there's no one inside. Now, when police find this out, they immediately go to the location to see if it's still there, and the car is in fact still parked there, so they immediately impound it and begin searching it for evidence, running forensics, DNA tests, all of the things to see if they could find DNA inside the car of their perpetrator. While waiting on the results to come back, the investigator decides he is going to go on a stakeout in front of the store and see possibly if the perpetrator decides to just show back up, walk down the street, any of that. He is actually in luck when 2 white males come walking down the street dressed mostly in black, one of them about 6 feet, the other one about 5'5". He immediately hops out of his car, approaches the guys, shows them the visuals, like the security footage, and he's just like, "Are you them?" To his surprise, the guys are like, "Yeah, that's us." The investigator initially felt like this was a bit of a shot in the dark, like this was a long shot that they would just come strolling down the street, but here they are admitting that this is them on the camera, and he is feeling like, yes, like this was easy, I got him. But unfortunately for him, these guys were frequently strutting the area because they actually worked at the restaurant about 2 doors down. And they often walked together because they lived in the same direction. As for the all black, they were both bus boys, and so that was the uniform. Their alibi was easily verified by the restaurant. They were working. Having to now go back essentially to the very beginning and comb over the entire case again, detectives started to realize that a few of the things that Sis said were not adding up. Some things just did not make sense. The 2 guys show up, allegedly have a backpack, but they attack Jana and only use weapons found inside the store. So did they just show up without their own weapons? Like, why would they use the items inside the store? Even the zip ties that they used on Brittany belonged to the store. The next thing that they revisit is the shoe prints. The 2 different sizes are in line with Brittany's story. One guy is 6 foot, the other one is really short, about 5'5". So it would make sense that they would have 2 different size shoe prints inside the store. But what didn't make sense was the pattern. You would expect them that if they took the 2 different girls in different directions, they never saw each other after they were separated, there would be the 2 different size shoe prints all throughout the store, like random patterns. But these shoe prints were like on top of each other almost perfectly. It was a smaller print on the bottom, and then the size 14 was like almost perfectly on top of the smaller shoe print. Another thing is, it's 4 of them moving around the store. Should there not be 4 sets of shoe prints? Even if you entertain the idea that Jana does not have any, let's say no blood was shed before she was taken down, and so there are none of hers. There should still be 3 because Brittany was moved around the store. Should there not be 3 sets of shoe prints instead of just the 2? And then, of course, the most obvious oddity of this whole thing was the differences between the 2 women's injuries. Jana is brutally attacked. Brittany has very superficial scratches. Granted, she did have a gash on her forehead, but if the 2 men were these white cis men, as Brittany claimed that they were, why would they attack Jana, the young white girl, so brutally and then cat scratch the black girl. Like, it just didn't make sense. Furthermore, while we're on the subject of the girl's wounds, it's also the fact that Jana's wounds are consistent with a very personal attack. The expert opinion was that she was attacked for 16 minutes almost straight, right? Let's knock 6 off and just say it was 10. To sit there and use multiple objects over the course of 10 minutes on somebody, you don't do that if it's not personal. Can there be a crazed maniac out there that overkills? Yes, but you typically do not see that in random attacks. Like, that is typically not a thing. All of these things, plus the statements that they received from the Apple employees, made them feel like, you know what? Brittany might not be a victim. Brittany might be who we are looking for all along. But still, they're thinking maybe she didn't act alone. Maybe she acted with someone else. So they continue their investigation, looking for anyone else that could be involved. They first began by interviewing people close to Brittany or people from her past that were familiar with her. And that is when they find out that sis is a whole klepto out here in these streets and that she likes to lie and steal. Allegedly. And you know what they say, child? They say if you will lie, you will steal, and if you will steal, girl, you'll kill. That's just what they say. They also find out from the store manager that Jana and Brittany were not friends at all, and that they really didn't even get along all that well. In fact, Jana had just recently, literally that night, suspected that Brittany was stealing from the store. A couple of days prior to this incident, the store managers and the key holders had also actually had a meeting where they discussed the fact that Brittany might be stealing from the store. And in that meeting, it was concluded that if anybody caught her with any merchandise, they would report it immediately and she would then be fired. It's also revealed that it's store protocol for any employee who leaves the store with a bag. It needs to be searched by somebody on the team to make sure they aren't taking anything, that don't belong to them. But that particular night, Brittany had refused to allow Jana to look into her bag. And then, of course, she had seen the black leggings anyway and called her and told her that Brittany was stealing. Now, when the lab tests come back, a lot of both Brittany and Jana's blood are found inside of the car. This is not something that makes investigators feel like, aha, yes, Brittany is involved, because it would make sense if somebody attacked the two ladies and then got into the car. Of course, they would have both of the victims' blood on them. But what made them feel like it was actually Brittany was the fact that there was a baseball cap inside of the car, belonged to Brittany, and it had blood at the forehead, on the rim, on the inside of the hat, exactly where Little Miss Mama's head gash was, which is muy suspicioso. Girl, I'm working on my Spanish because I'm going to Texas. I know it was good. I know. Now, they go back to interrogate Brittany a little bit more, not letting her know this is now being given the side eye and looked at as a potential suspect. And they ask her, where was Jana's car parked again? And she says, oh, right in front of the store. They then ask her, so where did Mr. 5-5 pull the zip ties from? And she's like, I told you he pulled them from his backpack, girl. By this time, they had actually examined the zip ties even closer and found teeth marks on those zip ties that were taken off of Brittany. This is the thing. If you're zip tying another person, how do you tie them up? With your hand. You just pull them. No problem. For no reason would you need to do so with your teeth unless you don't have hands. Now, if you zip tying your own wrists, however, what could you use to tighten up the zip ties other than your teeth? When they point this out to Brittany, she goes, oh, this is all still a shock. Like, everything is such a blur. She then tells them that this whole ordeal and this interview was just so emotionally draining, and just all of the things are overwhelming, and she just like to go home for the night if that was okay. They let her go for now. Now, Brittany waits a little bit, but she's at home feeling a little bit nervous, like, okay, this is not looking good. And so she decides to voluntarily go in and give the police more information. She goes in and tells them, things were kind of foggy before, but it's starting to clear a little bit. And I've now remembered more details that could probably be helpful and provide you guys some more clarity. She had forgotten that the assailants made her go through all of Jana's things and get her keys and drive the car down the block to abandon it. She said that she had actually seen a police officer down there, but she was too afraid that they had eyes on her out there in the streets to flag the officer down and get help. So she just did as she was told. She abandons the car and then walks back to the store 3 blocks where they were waiting for her, still there with Jana. Child, at this point, the investigators were so irritated because this was just literally blatantly insulting their intelligence by this point. Like, girl, this story is not believable at all. And that's pretty much what they tell her, like, ma'am, please stop, because the story that you're telling us, only a fool would believe. When they tell her that pretty much nobody believes her, that the story is so bizarre and unbelievable that it's insulting, actually, for her to believe anybody will go for it, she begins to cry, and she is still sticking to the story. She's like, I'm not lying. This is what happened to me. This is what happened to Jana. Justice for Jana. Like, she really is just laying it on thick. When they began highlighting all of the evidence that points toward her being the perpetrator, she just simply is like, girl, can I go home? Because this is all too much. They leave her alone inside the room for a second, and then they bring in her brother, who then comes in and tells her, like, look, if you did this, please let me know now so we can get ahead of this. Like, so I'll know what to say, because if this all comes out and hits the media, it'll be a whole shit storm and it won't look good. So just be honest with me and tell me if you did this. And she tells him, I don't want to talk about it here. Not, I didn't do this, or of course not, or I'm telling the truth. Sis is like, not here. That in itself was enough for them to just go ahead and arrest her right on the spot. She stuck to her story. She refused to admit any guilt. And so that forced them to just pretty much, with the evidence that they had, piece together a scenario explaining or detailing the events that had taken place over the night. One that just made sense based on what they know, which was basically that she found out that the Lululemon staff, they found out that she was stealing. They were onto her. So she knew that Jana finding the pants would most likely result in her being fired. She could not allow Jana to go back with that information and expose her. She decides to call Jana back to the store to discuss the accusations. But after the discussion turns into an argument, Brittany just snaps. Brittany has never spoken openly about what happened that night, what was said, what the conversation was, so we'll never truly know. And even if she does, how do we know sis is telling the truth, child? We'll never know exactly how the conversation transpired. That's just what they assumed happened. Her defense argued that this was not a situation that was premeditated, and that she pretty much had an undiagnosed mental disorder which caused her to respond and react the way that she did. They argued that nobody in their right state of mind would commit these heinous acts and then leave behind a trail of evidence and just be so sloppy and crazy with the story. Like, they were like, no, sis gotta be off. Her defense was very hopeful that the jury would agree that this was just an argument that spiraled out of control, and at no point did Brittany intend for things to go as far as they actually did, and that Brittany did not have the intent that is required for a first-degree conviction. Now, this made all the difference, because in Maryland, premeditated murder, that is life in prison without the possibility of parole. A second-degree conviction would give her a maximum of 30 years with the possibility of being released after only serving 15. But see, the problem with this is the fact that in Maryland, premeditation, according to their law, can happen within seconds. So it's like, girl, if you didn't show up to do it, it don't mean you didn't plan on doing it within the last like 2 seconds, girl. It's still valid. It's premeditated. So, child, things were not looking good for Miss Brittany. Period. At least not that Brittany. Well, girl, with the way my contour is looking right now, not being blended, they ain't looking too good for this Brittany either, but whatever. I'ma be alright. The trial only lasted for 6 days, and the jury sided with the prosecution, giving her a conviction in the first degree. Sis was sentenced to life with no parole, no chance of parole. Not here, not now, not ever. She had actually made a little plea that she be granted some grace and given a sentence that would eventually allow her to be paroled, just so she could hold on to some little bit of hope. Now, the judge that rejected this plea said, quote, let me read it for you, Jack, because I couldn't remember it. I am exceedingly reluctant to grant you even the slightest chance of doing this to another member of the community. After every blow, you had the chance to think about what you were doing. You were devious, in control, totally on top of the situation, while you lied to try to get out of what you had done. You are one hell of a liar, man. ma'am. He just got her all the way together with his little closing statement, and rightfully so. She definitely did not deserve the grace that she was asking for. Brittany was sick, honestly, and you know what they found out as far as the shoe prints? The smaller prints were her own, which I'm sure you probably know by now or figured out, but she had taken the size 14 shoe, which was actually a shoe that belonged to the store, dipped it in Jana's blood, and then printed over her own shoe prints to try to mask her footprints to make it seem like just one person was there with a big ass foot. I don't know if it's sickness or just stupidity at this point, but girl, honey, it's something. And it's like typically when you snap, like you come to. Girl, you came to, and that's what you came up with? 2 lives lost over a pair of leggings and a job. I wonder if people like Brittany go to jail and make friends. Like when you do something so ridiculous and disgusting, do you go to jail and make friends? After saying it out loud, I'm pretty sure there is a certain type of woman who will not take issue with what she did, and it's probably Sis's bestie. Sharing cigarettes and watching each other's back in the showers. That is pretty much it for this video and this look. I hope you like the look. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Let me know your thoughts down below. Girl, let's rant together because I was frustrated. This was another one that made my ass itch completely, and I said, you know what, they like set me up for my little feathers to be ruffled, child. As always, I appreciate you guys for spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video, which will be on Thursday. Peace. Oh, before I go, let me give y'all some nail cam because y'all be asking for it. And you know, for the last couple weeks, I've not had nails on. Y'all, my little finger's been looking like some little turkey hot dogs, girl. And so I finally decided to press a little set on. So the link for these will be in the description box below. Anyway, I'm about to let you go, girl. Bye. Or what it was like for her growing up in her household, girl. Now we don't know much about Brittany or girl. Okay, let me just gather my thoughts. Brittany is very dated. Oh no, look at my eyebrows, girl. One is up in the balcony section, girl, and one got floor seats. I got a whole attitude, but we gonna fix it. New teammates, girl. New teammates. They can eventually established. What am I trying to say, girl? What am I trying to say? And the other members. Oh, I'm not digging in my nose while I'm talking. Oh my god, my nose itches. A pair of Lululemon. There I go. It's not Lululemon. Lululemon. Did Brittany buy a pizza? Ugh. Experts. Yeah. Experts, girl. But I think that might be a word though, but not pertaining to this. Child just grabbed her up by her little hair. This is the last that she saw while giving her recollection. And upon reviewing the 3 holding up like 8 fingers. Wow. Pain from screaming. Pain from screaming. Girl, no. Now the officer was in the meantime though. Girl, what happened in the meantime? You just said in the meantime 3 times. By this time, examine the zip ties. What did I say? Yeah, damn sure I said zip ties. Piece together Sunuri. What is that? I feel like this hair is giving witch.